Cabinet Member for Adult Services, and thanks to Clive Lloyd for his input over the last year, which was, a really difficult year for him. So thanks to him. Okay, over to you, Liz, now for apologies for absence.
Okay, if I do the roll call, Mandy Evans.
Here, Liz.
Joe Hale. Chris Holly.
Present.
Paxton Hood-Williams.
Present.
Yvonne Jardine. Jeff Jones.
Yes, here.
Susan Jones.
Yes, I'm here.
Erica Kushner. Hazel Morris.
Yeah.
And we've received apologies from Gloria Tanner. Tony Beddoe.
Present.
Mark Childs.
Here.
Dave Howes.
Yeah, here.
Amy Hawkins.
Here.
Helen St John.
Apologies from Helen.
Okay.
Sorry, she has another meeting.
And Lucy Friday.
Hello.
Thank you. Okay, Chair, would you like me to move on to item 2?
Yes, please.
Apologies, Chair. I am here, Yvonne Jardine.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
I think Mandy is here as well, but she's on mute. So I don't know if you've got her down.
Yes, I got her. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. If we move on to item 2, which is confirmation of convener. Every year at the start of the municipal year, we have to confirm the convener of the panel. Sue Jones has confirmed that she is happy to continue. Is the panel happy for her to continue in that position?
I propose Sue Jones to remain as the convener.
And I'll second that.
Okay, thank you very much. If I hand over to you then, Sue.
Thank you, Liz. Item 3, then, disclosures of personal prejudicial, I can't even say it, prejudicial interests. Is there anybody who want to declare an interest in that?
Yes, Chair. My daughter works for social services.
Thank you. Anybody else? Item 4, prohibition of whipped votes and declaration of party whips. That goes without saying. Next item is the minutes of the previous meeting. And if we go to page 1, page 2, page 3, and page 4. Anybody got any comments? I take it then that it's...
In that case, I'll move them, Chairman.
Thank you, Paxton. Okay, now we go to item 7, Adult Service Transformation Programme. Amy,
Item 6. Item 6.
Item 6. Sorry.
Public questions.
Sorry, public questions. Are there any, Liz?
No, none have been submitted.
Lovely. Item 7, sorry about that. It's quite difficult when you put back and forth to machines. Update of Adult Service Transformation Programme then. Is it Amy? Are you taking the lead now because Helen's not here?
Yeah, I'm taking the lead on this.
And Lucy as well, yes?
Yeah.
So welcome to you both. And hand over to you.
Thank you. So if I'll just do the overview on this because actually Lucy and I have we've got 2 agenda items, so I think we're splitting them. I'll take the lead on this one and Lucy on the next one, but we'll both join in as appropriate. So this is to give you an overview of the Adult Services Transformation Programme. So it's not necessarily a progress update. This is the sort of start of year position in terms of our transformation plans for this year. I think in the context of saying this is we're obviously looking at post-COVID or during living with COVID recovery, and there is a balance of this report between contingency, recovery and also transformational ambition. So I think it's not a usual year. I suppose I just want to start really with that. It's quite a long report that we've given you in terms of all our plans, because it is aspirational as well. You know, we've got a lot of transformation plans that we're trying to deliver alongside, like I say, the contingency and the recovery approach as well. We've also included our service plan on a page as well, which actually is 2 pages, but we feel, considering it's such a large service, you know, we've condensed that as best we can. So just to pull out some of the highlights, we've really worked on this across the whole service. So we've looked at all our existing communication channels and also those that we developed and evolved during the remote way of working in the last year. We've had different review groups, different service-wide meetings, different forums where we've had lots of different input from the teams. There's also been an awful lot of work that's continued around the regional work streams and our citizen engagement panels, albeit quite differently because of the year we've had. Each team as well did a strength, weaknesses and opportunity threats analysis, so their SWOT analysis, and that all got pulled together into this plan. So we took a comprehensive approach to develop this. So our vision, I've got a feeling it might be slightly lost on the PDF version, but I'll just quickly give the overview of our adult services vision. So it's that people in Swansea will have access to modern health and social care services which enable them to lead fulfilled lives with a sense of well-being within supported families and resilient communities. And our mission, we will help to keep people safe and protected from harm and give opportunities to exercise voice, choice and control in all aspects of their lives. And our services focus on prevention, early intervention and enablement. And we're going to deliver better support for people, making the best use of resources available, supported by our highly skilled and valued workforce. So everything throughout our transformation plans and our service plan reflects our mission and vision as a service. The priorities we've got for this financial year that we're in now, 21-22, similar to last year, but revised as well in light of the year we've had. So we've still got better prevention and better early help and keeping people safe. Of course, there are absolute sort of statutory core functions and enabling and promoting independence. But we've also ensured that we've highlighted the integrated services and the focus obviously with the split heads of service and the role of the integrated head of service as well. We felt that was really important to have that as one of our key areas around those integrated services, and also looking at financial efficacy. I think we needed to mention the finances. You know, I mean, it's always within our plans, but it's right there in terms of our priorities as a service. And these are underpinned or supported by a focus on quality assurance and actually staff wellbeing, but you'll see that throughout the document as we go through. I won't go through it all in detail, sorry, just to reassure you, I know we've got a long agenda. So within the transformation programme, it's under those main themes that I've mentioned, which are our service objectives and priorities. So within better prevention and better early help, we've got a number of our programmes that we're delivering under our neighbourhood approach. So this is some of the regional funding that we've got, the regional transformation programme. We've also got our carer strategy implementation. And you'll hear a bit more about that actually in the coming report. We've got our child to family and to adult services transition. It's a really key focus of our work, both locally in Swansea, but also the regional approach and alongside health colleagues as well. And our approach to assistive technology. And again, you've got a report coming to a future scrutiny about assistive technology as well, so that you'll have an update there. The enabling independence, keeping people safe, we're focusing around our practice framework and the ongoing review of this and the development within the year ahead and where we can further improve and look for opportunities around our staff development there, and particularly the continued implementation of our collaborative communications approach. So this is our strength-based approach we take in all our work. We're looking at direct payments. It's an area that we've it's just as an alternative to more traditional methods of support, and there's been a sort of growth in that team in the last year, and we'll be looking at that in the coming months. We're also continuing our work around right sizing and reviewing of just to ensure that the provision is timely, that it's ensuring that it's enabling independence for people, and that we align the reviews, contracts that we have in place, and also financial arrangements, so that it all ties up to ensure that everything's right sized. In terms of integrated services and financial efficacy, so our sort of final areas of our priorities, the integrated working with partners locally across the region, with health, with third sector, has really developed so much and strengthened within the last year, and we want to build on this, both in terms of our regional programmes like hospital to home and the rapid discharge model, or home first actually as we're calling it now, but also looking at our commissioned models of care as well, and our internal service provision. So we're looking at our reviews of our, picking up, and I mentioned this in previous scrutinies as well, but our reviews of internal day support provision, also our residential strategy in light of the year we've had, in light of the demand that's going to be in the sector, and also what's happening in the private sector as well. So just ensuring that we're offering the most appropriate residential offer, whether that's respite focus, but also reablement focus as well. So not just step down from hospital, but step up from community as well. We're looking at the integrated models of delivery, just in terms of our, as mentioned, everything around sort of working with health and working with third sector and other partners as well. And just where we can, ensuring that, not just where we can, but all across the board, looking at maximising external grant funding and the funding that we do get, ensuring we're using it as effectively as we can be. Also looking at our complex care work streams as well. So we've got a real focus around learning disabilities, physical disabilities and mental health strategies in the coming year. As mentioned, the financial side of it, we are ensuring that we're achieving our core budget savings, but also how we get into the recovery phase of delivery. And it's going to be, there are challenges. There's so many unknowns as well at the moment, but it's so managing those challenges and the risks. And also the long-term funding. We've talked again at previous scrutinies about uncertainty around the long-term funding stream. So I think it's just ensuring that we're aware of this and managing these risks going forward. And the commissioning reviews as mentioned. And then alongside this work, underpinning it is around communication within the service. Expanding on our co-production approach. So we've got our co-production strategy, and it's ensuring we're going to embed that in everything we do. And also quality assurance and improvement. So a real focus around quality assurance and customer service, and then making sure we've got a workforce development plan. So that's there's a diagram in the report as well that talks about our workforce development programme. Again, our biggest asset in terms of the workforce, and it's just ensuring that the well-being side of it's focused on, staff development focused on, and recruitment and retention, and that we've got the right structures. There's some information about the governance of the programmes. And also just our service plan, so to show how it fits into our service plan. And within our service plan, just finally to mention, we've got some of our measures, success measures, and I know previous meetings as well have talked about outcomes and outputs, and so there's our very streamlined, just 4 headline measures that we're going to measure this year, but please be assured that we measure many things, but this is just the sort of 4 headline ones that we want to focus on in terms of our transformation plans. And I gave no offer for Lucy to come in at all there. Sorry, Lucy, but I don't know if I missed anything, Lucy, that you want to include.
No.
Okay.
All right, Lucy.
Yeah, no, that was perfect. Covered it off very well.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Amy or Lucy? Tony.
I did let Liz have some yesterday, Chair, which I assumed would be given to colleagues in advance, but apologies if that hasn't happened. Quite happy for those to be read out or put if Liz has them to hand, or I can run through some of them.
Liz, are you happy to read out the questions that Tony has given you?
I've got the questions. They were passed on yesterday when I received them, but I know some officers were actually on leave, so wouldn't have had a chance to see them. But I mean, I can read them, Tony, but if you just want to say them yourself, as your questions.
In your hands or the chair's hands. I mean, I'm happy to try and run through them if that's acceptable.
Questions, so maybe it's better that you give them.
Okay, I'll do my best. Like you, I'm looking at 3 bits of paper. The first one is in paragraph 2.1 on page 8. And I was just curious as to what have been the past developments and the things on the horizon in terms of further changes to the use of assistive technology, both by volumes and types, and to what extent those might allow us to move in a different or better direction. Perhaps if we do the monitor time, and that'll give colleagues a chance to respond.
Okay. Are you happy for me to answer that, Amy? Okay. Yeah, so as mentioned in the plan, the assistive technology strategy is still in development. That will be reported to panel later in the year. But in line with your questions, we have had a significant investment to date in terms of assistive technology. Obviously, that's a historic case, and also recently we've invested, and that's come to the fore during the pandemic, really. So examples of our assistive technology, obviously encompassed within that is our telecare offer. So we've always, well, we have historically had a telecare offer, but building upon that, so our community alarms service, telecare, but also we've introduced around 100 smart hubs as well. So particularly during the pandemic, that's been really useful. So these are literally plug in, don't require any hardwire installation or anything like that. So during the pandemic, when people access to people's homes has been limited, it's even been so easy to fit that family can pick up the kit and put it in their loved ones' homes. So again, offering the same and slightly enhanced services. So there's pager alerts direct to family or carers or support networks, as well as connectivity to our central call centre as well, if there's any issues. So that overall, in terms of, to give you an idea in terms of volume, across our community alarms telecare stock, we have around 3,000 kits out there in the community. With the smart hubs, we have around 100 smart hubs in stock. We've tried to use them to really enhance our, for example, our rapid discharge model. So when people are discharged from home, it offers a little bit of extra assurance and a little bit of extra security to family and also the clients, obviously. So they are really helpful in terms of quick installation, as I explained. So we have those in. And quite often they're replaced later on with something that's a bit more permanent if needs be, or they're taken away completely if the person's been re-abled and the need is no longer there. In addition to telecare and those sorts of options, we did invest quite significantly last year using funding in just checking kits, and I would imagine you've probably heard about these in this panel over the years. We'd like to take that further in terms of the strategy, so going forward. So at the moment we have a relatively small number in stock. We have around 50 just checking kits. These are fantastic devices, again, offering the same sort of level of assurance to clients and family to be able to monitor movement. So basically they're sensors that are fitted around the home, and they can monitor movement and activity of the individual. So these are great in terms of offering an insight into what someone's able to do whilst at home on their own, to monitor their progress in terms of movement. So as part of our re-ablement programme, it's really helpful. Therapists link in with the data that they produce, and they're able to use that to inform part of their assessment. So when they're not there with the individual, they can actually see their activity day to day, collated. Likewise, social work teams can also use that to inform how they approach their collaborative communications assessment. So when they're looking at strengths-based, they can refer back to the information that they gain from the smart hubs. It is an area, as I said, that we'd like to expand on, because particularly with client groups such as clients with dementia, again, it's just that extra bit of information and security, I suppose, really, to assure people that we're enabling independence, but in a safe and resilient way. Outside of those other bits, we've also got areas of investment in terms of chair and bed sensors, also door sensors, similar theme as the other items that I've mentioned. So those are the the ones that we have in stock at the moment, and where we'd like to expand at the moment. But as I said, the strategy itself is still in development. There is still a lot of work to be done around that, but there is going to be a report. I believe that it's coming to panel around October or November time, I believe, for a full update of the strategy. But those are the key headlines that I thought it'd be useful to share.
Thank you, Lucy. Can I go to Chris Holly for a question, please?
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if I could ask, it's quite a relatively simple question, but I meant Amy mentioned the core budget savings. Could you explain what the core budget savings are, please?
Chris, I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to ask Lucy if you can. What I do know is that we've identified them and we've already, on the budgets, taken them into consideration this year.
Okay,
I can't remember which headings they were against. Yes,
if you could let us know, but that also covers the res homes and the day centres, because obviously after the pandemic there are concerns around the residential homes and the day service. So if we could have a bit of an update on them and just send it around, email it to me and the rest of the members as well. Thank you.
Definitely.
Let Liz know that and she can actually pass it on to everybody.
Yeah.
Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. Yeah, I didn't see Tony's question, but I was going to ask about assistive technology, and thanks for the answer there. The other part I was going to ask about was direct payments. I must admit, I remember my time, and it's not been that long as a councillor, where direct payments were perhaps not encouraged by some people and so on. Now it seems to be a fundamental part, and it's even shown as income. So what proportion of direct payments, if we actually know that, actually come directly to us, or do go out to the perhaps private sector or whatever? You know, do we know that figure? And if it actually comes to us, what sort of services do we provide for those direct payments?
Yeah. I hope I'm going to be clear, and yeah, I'll try and explain this. So with the direct payments, usually people come into us when they've had their care and support plan and it's identified that they have X amount of requirements. They can those requirements might be met by our in-house service, so perhaps one of our day services, or someone could say, actually what I want is using my care and support requirements of 5 hours worth of personal assistant, and so then they might have a direct payment where they themselves manage that payment directly and purchase that personal assistant time, you know, to support them with their care and support needs. Or they could use the direct payment to purchase a place in a day provision that's delivered by the independent sector and not ourselves. If somebody wants to use our in-house services, they don't usually access them via a direct payment. We just sort that out via their care and support plan. So we wouldn't need to actually go through that process. It's almost adding a layer of bureaucracy that's not needed. So if someone just needs 2 days in the day service, they go to the day service. But what would happen is that their care and support needs would be financially assessed, whether they needed to make a contribution themselves to that, both for the direct payment and or the in-house offered service. So generally speaking, and actually this was one of Tony's questions as well, was about could direct payments be used for in-house provision, to purchase in-house provision? In theory, yes, but in practice they don't need to be, you know, because we cut out that process and people can go straight to the service and use it. So it would just be adding another layer of a sort of process, really, and it's something that we it's not been requested before by anybody. Usually people are accessing direct payment, or always people are using direct payments for private, third sector or individually procured provision, you know, whether that's a personal assistant, whether that's, you know, they can group together with a number of individuals and set up sort of social enterprises to provide the provision. You know, that's something we want to encourage, but that's the usual approach for direct payments.
Okay, thanks.
Paxton, Councillor Paxton Hood-Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. Following on from that, really, in terms of domiciliary care in the rural areas and the problems associated with that, and I heard you then talk about social enterprises, how much work are we doing there now to try and develop the situation along the sort of Somerset model, as I understand it, because we were certainly looking at that in the People PDC. And how are we going to develop that to ensure that we got the coverage across rural areas, basically, I suppose.
Yeah, Lucy, you're going to come in. I was going to say we've got a project at the moment that is doing some work around this, but just in terms of, I'll just mention quickly, at the moment we have taken on a number of new providers just in the pandemic in terms of dom care provision, and we've got a quite good coverage across the whole county in terms of availability of providers, both in the rural areas and in the more urban or more densely populated areas. So it isn't so much of an issue, but alongside that, we are trying to support this, whether it's development of social enterprise models or other approaches. So Lucy, I don't know if you can update on that. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I was going to say the same as you, Amy. I think with the recommissioning of domiciliary care programme that occurred last year or the year before, yeah, the expansion and coverage of rural areas has improved. Likewise as well, just to elaborate on that as well, with the use of our in-house reablement service and in-house long-term care service as well, we've improved our coverage across the rural areas as well, in acknowledgement of that issue. But yeah, so there was a programme that was started last year with Co-Production Wales and colleagues in the third sector in the Swansea Council Voluntary Service, called Communities Together programme. And that is focused on hyper-local solutions, being community-led, really establishing. So what that programme was doing was using resources on the ground, so neighbourhood development officers and co-production colleagues, to understand where the need was, where the gaps were in provision, and identify where there are opportunities to actually support local businesses or individuals grouping together to make better use of their direct payments, like Amy said, or to help startups for local businesses as well to provide support. And quite often what we found through that preliminary work that was done to scope out what the need was in rural areas was that sometimes there were people who didn't necessarily require the full set of care that we normally have through an assessed service, but instead it might be additional support or lower level support, for want of a better phrase. And there were real opportunities there, and there is an opportunity for growth which is going to be taken forward for the next year as well. But yeah, it builds on the community-based work that is happening throughout a lot of our programmes. So really the third sector, the local area coordinators, so kind of understanding, getting the nugget of the issue and then growing that with the community that they're working with to understand and develop what is best placed to suit that need, rather than trying to fit it into a box of domiciliary care necessarily. But yeah, so that work is in progress and will continue for the year ahead.
Thank you both. Tony, have you got another question?
Okay.
Sorry, did Baxter want to come back? Or?
I only said thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of the hospital to home discharge arrangements, as paragraph 2.3 sets out, I was wondering how far we've got in terms of going further beyond that, in terms of picking up some of the activity that might prevent a hospital referral or a hospital admission in the first place, so that in fact we don't discharge them from a hospital at all, but we intercept them before they get there and offer them probably a better and a more responsive service. I mean, to what extent is that thinking driving the partnerships between, for example, the health boards, the ambulance service, the social care team on the ground, and some of our voluntary bodies that are looking out for that kind of problem and acting before it gets beyond the point of being rescuable?
Yeah, good question, and just some reassurance that a lot of our work is at that multidisciplinary team focused, in the community focus, whether that's the front door of social services. So the front door of social services has got a multidisciplinary team. So if the person's requirements there are that sort of support, whether that's intervention from occupational therapist or from the wider links with the district nurse teams, or whether it's social work intervention, or a community-based response, that's what we'll be focused on there. or from the mental health single point of access as well. So there's different teams, all our sort of different entry points into social services. I think the same with our residential offer. At the moment, we do offer some step up provision from the community as well. So it could be that we're offering, it could start as respite, but then we're doing more assessments to talk about what assistive technology someone might need in their home. You know, so they might have short-term step up residential provision, but longer term in the community again, which will prevent that sort of hospital or more intensive intervention further down the line. And the same with we're looking at doing more assessments around within our residential settings around people's most appropriate at home package of support that's required. So that's something that we're looking to use our beds for going forward. We do elements of that at the moment, but it's an area I think we see as an expansion area. And again, you'll hear more about that in the coming year. It's one of our transformation programmes. Lucy, I don't know if you want to expand on what I've just said as well, or add more.
Only to add in terms of regional work streams, working alongside and pretty much the same ends is, so as Amy explained, hospital to home, which is now called Home First. Working alongside that regionally is the Keep Me at Home programme. So basically bringing it all together, as you mentioned, with the Welsh Ambulance Service, and making those links with third sector, as well as health colleagues, district nursing and so on. As Amy explained, we are working towards the same outcome, to prevent people going into hospital at all, or to, if they do have to go into hospital, making sure they can return home as quickly and as safely as possible and being re-abled to remain at home. So they're all working towards the same ends.
So just on that, I mean, if someone wanted to say, well, have we got any metrics that shows, if only approximately, how many such urgent referrals to hospital or to the ambulance service we think we have prevented by anticipatory care? Are we close to having an information system that would at least give some kind of assessment as to how the thing has shifted over, let's say, the last 5 years, in terms of cases that we could cite as being ones that in the old days it would have been a 2 a.m. in the morning dash to casualty, and then three or 4 days in the medical ward before we could finally get the individual to somewhere that was more appropriate?
Amy, do you want me to help with them? It's a very difficult question to answer, because anything that's preventative, by definition, means it doesn't touch our formal systems, so counting becomes really hard. However, in terms of our IAA, or information advice and assistance, or signposting out, although not truly preventive because they would have already contacted us, but that signposting information, we do have numbers around that in terms of the number of people that we've, forgive the phrase, but pushed away from or offered advice and guidance alternative to statutory services. We can count those. In terms of outcomes and closing the loop on it, that's where it creates a challenge for us. So there is work ahead in terms of understanding that better. So what we've tried to do in terms of our neighbourhood approach model is link up those referrals out to third sector, for example, with our colleagues in the third sector, to really understand the full route of the referral and the outcomes for that individual. So trying to get a better understanding of outcomes. And it doesn't mean that with the large age group that we deal with, there is always the reality that at some point there will be an intervention required from social services or the health board or the health system. But it's about making sure that we can enable people to remain at home for as long as possible and live independently for as long as possible. So yeah, we're doing that. And also likewise on the flip side of that, in terms of tracking the effectiveness of our reablement route out of hospital, and understanding the timeline for that individual is all part of the Home First outcome measures as well. So we're able to track and understand readmissions. In addition, with the Home First model, I suppose, because we always talk about hospital discharge, we kind of miss that there's actually a pathway zero, if you like, which is where we do have people coming into A&E, and we do have a resource placed within A&E, social work resource specifically, from our point of view, working with colleagues in the health board to do that signposting and active preventative step if someone does end up in A&E who doesn't need to be admitted for a health reason, but there's some intervention that we can offer or some help or guidance that we can offer that prevents an unnecessary admission, whereas previously perhaps there would have been more of a pull into a hospital bed for certain cases. So it's a bit of a difficult one, but we're working on.
But just to close the loop on that, if the health and social care services together sampled, let's say, 100 urgent visits to A&E or admissions of the over 75s, and asked, was there anything we could have done to have prevented that referral or admission? What do you think the sample would show? Would it show that there's still an opportunity to have picked something up beforehand?
Yeah,
I mean, do we have that kind of retrospective assessment in place?
It is part of the performance monitoring model for an outcome measures model for the regional Home First programme. So it's, as I said, because it is technically a pathway, although we're not, it is a signposting out. So we can count the number of referrals that are coming through that are being signposted to our third sector, and we can, using health board systems, count the number that are going through, have required guidance or signposting utilising the MDT approach at the front door of the hospital, so before admission. I haven't got those numbers to hand. I know there's still scope for improvement, and that goes hand in hand with the availability of resources out there in the community to signpost too. So there's always going to be opportunities to develop that and grow it. But the signs are good. We know that it's a worthwhile intervention. We know it's a worthwhile investment having skilled workforce at that front door for that very reason. So we do have some information on that because that's part of our regional reporting. So we would be able to bring that through and share it with the group definitely throughout the year. That's part of our regional performance measures.
Right. Okay.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any more questions? Thank you both, Lucy and Amy. We'll go on to item number 8 now. Report of the Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care and Community Health Services. So is it over to you now, Mark?
Councillor Jones, sorry, there's one item in between, the Wales Audit Office report.
Oh, have I missed? Oh, I'm awful. Sorry. I wish I had the agenda at my side. I haven't. Thank you, Liz, for that. Okay, do we go on to that item then? Who is going to take that?
That's for me, Chair. I will try and
thank you, Lucy.
Okay, so this is a follow-up on a report that was presented to panel back in March 2020, which in itself followed on from a report from the Welsh Audit Office around our approach to information advice and assistance and the adult services front door. So very briefly, just to remind everyone of the context of that report, the main question of the study was our local authority first point of contact assessment and processes better meeting the needs of service users and carers in line with the commitments of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. So really the key areas of focus that they drilled down to were how effective are we at doing the what matters to you assessments, the ease of individuals, members of our community in accessing wellbeing services and care and support, how far we've gone to shift towards a preventative model, the impact of the assessments on people's wellbeing, and of course across all of it, a real focus on carers as well. So it links very nicely to what we've been talking about already. So rather than go through talk about the report, the only thing I would point out, and I'm sure this was mentioned originally, was that the Welsh Audit Office report was conducted on a Wales-wide basis. So it used some key bits of information from Swansea, such as demand figures and financial information. However, we weren't one of the local authorities that actually received a visit or closer scrutiny from the Welsh Audit Office. So these recommendations are broad and they apply to the whole of Wales. However, there were certainly key recommendations that came through that really resonated, and we have utilised the information and taken forward as part of our transformation programme. So in brief, their recommendations were that we really needed to address some of the concerns around the consistency of approach to carers assessments, to make sure there was an equal status given to carers assessments as well as service user assessments, making sure they were equally as comprehensive. To really work closer and better with our third sector partners and other organisations to understand the gaps in preventative services and where there are opportunities to work together better and maximise on the community assets. And there are also, although there were gains being made in terms of a decrease in the number of assessments being carried out, this wasn't being played out in terms of the spend in adult services and the number of people actually accessing advice and information alone. So it does tie back to some of the questions asked previously about the effectiveness and outcomes of preventative services. So we took forward 2 recommendations that they pulled out in the report, improving access to the front door. So essentially within that, they make recommendations around the quality and level of information, how that information is shared and accessed, and as I said, improving our cross-organisation working, and also they specifically pointed out commissioning advocacy services as well. And secondly, they also said about investment and implementation of structures to better understand preventative services, as I've explained. So really working with partners to map and analyse demand. So when we presented back in March 2020, we gave an update at that point in time, and we also said that we had 9 specific actions to take forward for the year ahead. So it was March 2020, I think it was like mid-March 2020. So things changed quite suddenly for us shortly after that meeting. But the principles of the actions have been taken forward, and across the board they've been either completed or have been expanded upon and remain in progress. So really briefly, in terms of our improving access to the front door, of course, our collaborative communications approach continues. So in terms of assessment and access to assessment for everyone, we do have our common access point personnel at the forefront of that, and really the forerunners in terms of that approach. That's come to the fore even more during the pandemic, as I'm sure you've spoken about in this group a lot over the year. So really looking at alternative models of care, focusing on the strengths-based approach to enable people to remain at home and live well and independently. So we've continued with that. But we've also, over the 12 months as well, as we've already talked about, we've been bolstered by improved or expanded relationships with our third sector colleagues and community-based teams, for want of a better word. So we've got neighbourhood development officers who are employed by Swansea Council Voluntary Service, working alongside our enhanced team of local area coordinators as well. So really they're on the ground, they're understanding what's needed and what's out there, and they are a point of contact for our common access point. And during the pandemic, we've also expanded a process of referral to the neighbourhood development officers from our hospital and also from our community social work teams as well. So the approach that we've been able to provide during the pandemic around access to things like befriending services, food delivery, medication delivery, all of that has been offered out to all of the teams as well, so we can all take advantage of it, which has been fantastic. In terms of our information and the quality of that information, originally, as part of our action plan, we had anticipated to use ICF funding to completely revise our current suite of information, do a piece of work co-productively with carers to develop a new set of information around what support and guidance was available. and to really do an audit, for want of a better word, of the information platforms and so on. This was paused because of COVID, and so instead, what's happened is we've actually we've built on the information that we have already. As you will know, within our council website, we do have signposting information for all access for everyone for those community-based services that are out there. This also links with SCVS's local website as well, which has named leads for each of the wards and the services and contact numbers for provision underneath those wards. So it's hyper-local information. The report mentioned DERIS. Now, of course, we've continued to promote and use DERIS within the authority. It is the responsibility of organisations to manage the information that they upload onto DERIS. That is the point of the database. And during the I think I should get like a card for every time I say during the pandemic. During the pandemic, we've that information has changed almost like on a daily, weekly basis, as you can imagine, because as people are shielding, volunteer-led organisations have suffered as a result of the restrictions that have been in place and public health guidance and so on. So helpfully, we've also had direct links with InfoEngine. So the two systems are very similar. So what we've tried to do is exploit the fact that there are, whereas an organisation might use InfoEngine rather than DERIS, we're making sure that the systems are talking to each other. So all of the information is up to date, whether it's updated on DERIS or whether it's updated on InfoEngine. And again, SCVS have been keeping on top of that information as well, and their website is kept up to date, which we link to. Independent advocacy service were actually commissioned in 2019 through Mental Health Matters. So that's one of the actions that has been completed. What we'd like to do going forward in terms of following on from conversations with commissioning colleagues is that we have set out as part of the agreement, as part of the procurement, that they would provide some more detailed information on the type of advocacy that they're offering the client groups, so that we can really drill down to carers who are accessing those advocacy services as well. In terms of our carer specific improvements, we've actually, working regionally with Newport Talbot, third sector and carers, there has been the West Glamorgan Regional Carer Strategy, and I believe that is going to be presented to Cabinet later on this month. That's my understanding. So that strategy has basically defined a 5-year action plan for carers, and as I said, has been developed with carers across the region. So what we have done, and this features in our transformation programme, is that we've worked with our colleagues on that and our members of our community, and we've developed a Swansea implementation action plan as a result. And that covers off many of the actions that we'd already talked about last year and more. It certainly covers off the recommendations that were made by the Welsh Audit Office in terms of our preventative services, mapping, understanding the gaps and commissioning opportunities with third sector. So the priorities of our local strategy are listed in the paper. I won't go through all of them. However, the themes resonate throughout. So it's about giving people carers equal status in terms of our approach and our delivery of assessment, and also the well-being, supporting people to actually have the right information and access to advice and so on. So that work has progressed. To date, the governance arrangements and the group setup of that local strategy has been established, and as you would hope, it is representative of all walks of our services and community. Training has already commenced in terms of our workforce to really upskill and I suppose give our social workers and all people working within the service a better understanding of carers' conversations. So really just to give them a bit more confidence in terms of how to approach assessments. So phase 1 has been completed with that, supported by Carers Wales. So training has been delivered, so that was completed during May. Phase 2, which will be a bit more focused on social work practitioners, is going to be commencing in July. So hopefully that will see some benefits, and obviously a key measurable output of that for us will be an increase in the number of carers assessments completed. And I think that's largely it. The only thing to conclude really is that the in terms of prevention investment and understanding of the impact, this does tie back to our conversation before, and it also picks up with bits that I've already mentioned. But again, we've invested in local area coordination. As we've mentioned already, we are working very closely with the third sector organisations across a number of different work streams. This is all building our picture of what's needed and how we can better invest and really build our suite of preventative services. And we've also been able to expand and establish clearer referral routes to those same preventative services. We do, as Amy mentioned in the transformation update, we do also have a link with this with our neighbourhood approach transformation funding. There is clear exit planning that needs to go on to manage the end of that funding. And again, linking back to the questions that were raised previously, fundamental to that is a better understanding of impact and outcomes of those preventative services. So local area coordination, they're currently undergoing a follow-up review with Swansea University to better understand and critically evaluate the activity and the outcomes. They're also going to be proposing future outcome measures and metrics that can be put in place for the team so that we have a suite of information that we can draw upon. Likewise, third sector organisations have utilised funding to invest in Charity Log, which is a database that does have the functionality to capture qualitative as well as quantitative information. And again, that links back to how we are making the links between our signposting activity and pushing away from more traditional care routes to preventative measures. So overall, there has been very good progress, substantial progress against the recommendations of the Welsh Audit Office report. There is certainly a lot more work to be done, but it is the recommendations feature throughout not only individual programmes, but across our entire strategy for adult services. So it's represented very clearly, and governance is there to manage the outputs as well and report on updates.
Thank you, Lucy. Can I just say that the local area coordinators, from a councillor's point of view, has been essential, second to none. So thank you for that. Are there any questions for Lucy? Chris, your hand is up. You're on mute.
Thank you, Lucy, for a very comprehensive report back from the report. It's two questions I would like to ask. The first one is about the third sector and what sort of connection we have, and is it a contractual service, and how is that funded? Because we have had many complaints that the Swansea Council for Voluntary Services have had major problems with their funding. So I was wondering how we operate with them with the funding. And the second one is about the advocacy service, and if we could have some, how is that operating? I have to declare an interest. I'm an advocate for someone who is currently in a nursing home. Obviously not a professional advocacy, but how does that professional service work, please? Thank you.
Amy, do you want me to?
Yeah, I was going to say I can come in. Yeah, I can come in on the funding side of it, or elements of the funding side of it. So in terms of SCVS's funding, we've got a couple of avenues. Some of it is through pots of external grants at the moment, and I think maybe that's the bit Lucy might come in on. But we do give them core funding as well, both in terms of the volunteering service aspect of it, but also the core work as well that SCVS do for us under our compact agreement with them as well. So there's some funding that comes via our contracting team and our commissioning team rather to SCVS, both for the volunteering and the third sector support that they provide, but also there's different projects that we do with them through various pots of money. And I suppose some of that is like the community one we mentioned earlier about those micro social enterprises. There's also other projects we're doing, like the Poverty Truth Commission, where we contracted them to do certain pieces of work. And Lucy, you might want to say just about the ONA and that side of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, ONA funding is, so the proportion to SCVS has increased to reflect really the activity and the fantastic work that they have continued to do over the last 12 months. So that's meant that they can invest in more neighbourhood development officers working alongside local area coordinators. So local area coordinators work very closely. SCVS offer a quite specialist service because they can take and run with models of social enterprise, whereas obviously that's not the role of the local area coordinators. So that's the benefit that we see from there. But I suppose the key thing is really the same as us, it's exit planning, post funding. And I suppose that's the bit that SCVS and we are particularly interested in. So that's why we're so focused on understanding better the outcomes, so that we can really truly understand the benefit of all of these different models, and to understand how we commission going forward, really, for longer term.
Okay, thank you. About the advocacy service?
Advocacy service. So yes, so they were commissioned via Mental Health Matters Wales, and that was actually completed in 2019. We do have so they're an independent advocacy service. I have to admit that, you know, this isn't my area of expertise, so it might not be that I can answer fully your question, but I will try my best. So as my understanding is that it is available to all, where they are basically, so either a person or a carer, where there's a barrier to them actually accessing support or achieving the assistance they need to. So we have got, so I know that they actually offer the same service in Bridgend as well. And having spoken to commissioning colleagues, as I mentioned when I fed back, we do want to elaborate in terms of the reporting that comes from Mental Health Matters. We'd like to better understand the types of intervention that they're offering, or the types of support, I should say, that they're offering in a bit more detail. And really that's going to be through their reporting to really evaluate the effectiveness of that commissioned service. But yeah, essentially it's an completely independent advocacy service available to anyone who is eligible for advocacy, and that's carers and people. But I can get more information on that organisation if that would be helpful.
Yeah, because the reason I asked that is because obviously it does. I don't know who the individual would be, but they would have to have some sort of either legal background or either that or in social services. So, you know, without any feedback about how it performs and how it works, it's very difficult for us as members to say, well, you know, it's something worth supporting. So I think if we could understand like who does it and how has it worked and how is it managed, I think that would be a worthwhile exercise. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, no problem.
Thank you, Chris. Are there any other questions? I see no hands up. Tony, you're flashing in and out. Are you wanting to ask a question?
Oh, I'm sorry if I'm flashing, Chair. No, I didn't intend to ask a question on that part of the agenda. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you for that, both of you. Again, we go on to agenda item 9 now, which is the review of charges to social services.
Chair, I'll apologies. I've turned my camera off, so I have to go and lay down. I'm not feeling very well, but I will pick up this item. Before I do, I just to acknowledge the contribution that Lucy's made to this meeting. I was sitting listening, really impressed. One of the things I was reflecting on is in order to move as a directorate, as a social services directorate, towards a position where we genuinely can focus on transformation, genuinely focus on being the best that we can be as an organisation, as a business. I know that's sometimes an anathema to us to describe what we do as a business, but it is a business, and it is a very complex business. In the past, it's felt we've relied on senior managers and senior leaders who have come through the ranks of social care, of led services, and of course that's really important. And of course, the backbone of our leadership and management arrangements. But over recent years, we've brought in different skills, and the kind of skill of very complex transformation program is able to sit in a meeting like this and talk, really well from my perspective, very accurately around a whole host of things that she said herself at times. She's not an expert in these things. What she's an expert in and what she's brought to the organisation is those skills in project leadership, in being as business-like as we can, and of course along the way pick up lots of very detailed knowledge about different specialisms, service areas. I just wanted to give her a shout out and thanks. There are other Lucys across our organisation now, but it's Lucy that we've heard from today, and certainly as director, I was sitting here, extremely proud and really appreciative of all the hard work of Lucy and colleagues. So thanks for humouring me and allowing me to get on my soapbox, Chair. I'll move on to this item. So every year, as you're aware now, again, as part of being both more business-like and being absolutely transparent, we introduced a number of years ago now, I can't remember how many, 3, 4, 5, something like that, an approach where the director would carry out an annual review of the charging arrangements, would look to see whether there needed to be any changes to the council's policies around charging, and also to make recommendations to Cabinet about his view about what Cabinet should be considering around potentially any new charges or any uplifts to existing charges. All of that stuff used to go on in the past. Of course it did, because we've always charged for many years we've charged for care services. But I'm not sure the transparency was fantastic, and that's part of our mantra, to be transparent about what we do and to make sure purposeful decision making exists within our directorate, and that Cabinet and Council are to that effect. So even during the pandemic, we still stuck with the same process. So we carried out our review. I was able to make recommendations, probably some tweaks to the existing policy, and to make recommendations to Cabinet at the appropriate part of the budget cycle effectively. And the key recommendations were: one, we shouldn't be, from my perspective, shouldn't be introducing any new charges, but we should apply an inflationary uplift to the existing charges that we make. Those were the recommendations that were made to Cabinet. You'll see from the report that they were accepted, and the budget was on the expectation that those charges would be implemented, etc. So that's really, in many ways, this is a much simpler report than you will have seen in previous years, where we were introducing new charges for things like day services. We were making significantly, I was recommending significant uplifts around charges for domiciliary care because they hadn't been uplifted for many years. Actually, what we were charging was completely out of kilter with what the cost of services were, and we lagged behind other local authorities, and that the revenue support grant that the council receives as a significant contributor to the cost of social care, presume we're charging to similar level councils. It was for sustainability of services for us to come in line. But that was a few years ago. At this stage now, as I say, my view was that it wasn't necessary or appropriate for us to be instigating new charges or to be recommending any above inflationary uplifts of charges this year. The only other bit the report picks up on, and this was subsequent actually to the report that was taken to Cabinet, that you may have noticed in the report that this year in England there was a significant challenge of a council, Norfolk, around their charging policy, and effectively the challenge was that their policy was discriminatory, that it actually prejudiced individuals with often with the most severe of disabilities, so was perverse to that extent. That was challenged, and that challenge was successful. Now, clearly, it's beholden upon us to look to see whether there is any learning from that test case, to make sure that we don't find ourselves in a similar position. The charging regime in England and Wales is very different, so we had a reasonable expectation that we were likely to be in a very different position, but we have done, or at least in the midst. It might be that Amy needs to update us where we're at with that review, but certainly on the last feedback that I received, we were confident and are confident as a council that our charging regime, that our policy isn't discriminatory. We have many, many more safeguards in place to make sure that that's not the case, and it was those safeguards that were effectively swept away by this English local authority that led to the challenge. So I don't believe we're in that position, but it has highlighted that we probably could do some further work around the transparency, not of our policy, not of our charge. We're very transparent around that, but the actual mechanics of how a financial assessment is carried out and all the factors that are taken into account. So one of the things that's been flagged is we could do further work on being more transparent around that financial assessment process as it is undertaken in this council. So that it's a flag for you here. It is something that you might want to briefly follow up at some stage, depending on whether Amy tells now that we do the work and absolutely everything that I've just described has turned out to be true. And that's what we're planning to do. This is be more transparent around that financial assessment process. So if I can just check with Amy, Chair, before we take any questions.
Yeah, just very briefly, we are confident that we're fully compliant and it's fine. But I think exactly as Dave said, we want to do some work around financial assessment guidance and some information we put on our website and share with people when they're in the position for having a financial assessment, and co-producing this with service users as well, to just make sure that the language is appropriate, the forms are appropriate, and everything is as transparent and clear as it can be.
Thank you, Amy. Right, questions now then. Chris, you have a question?
Yeah, it's just simply, what is the percentage inflation figure that you've used for the uplift? And I would welcome to see that report about the transparency and the application of the financial implementation. Those are the things, and if we could have a report back on that, it'd be delighted. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't document, Chris, to see it is in the report. The inflation has been applied. I think it was 1.7%, but I might be saying that wrong. And the thing that's caused me to go and lay on my bed is that I've gone all dizzy, so I can't really think. So I think it's 1.7. I can see Amy nodding, so I hope that's me remembering accurately.
Report, yeah.
1.75. Sorry,
1.75.
but very close. Yeah.
And yes, we'll bring back a further update when we've finished the work that described. I think what we'll share is what we intend to publish. That's probably the most useful thing for the.
Okay, are there any other questions Mark, you wanted to say something?
No, just briefly, because I haven't said anything. I think that 1.75 is a figure that is provided for Wales. It's not something that we've arrived at independently. I think it's an advisory figure that comes down from Welsh Government. Just to be clear on that. As Dave said at the beginning, this is a fairly standard version of this report. It's basically implementing the recommended rises, the expected rises. Nothing fancy, nothing difficult, nothing challenging particularly about it, apart from making sure that we do the same as we're trying to do everything, make sure we co-produce and as transparent as possible.
Thank you, Mark. Anybody got any questions? If not, we go on to the work plan. And I think Liz has highlighted what is in next month's meeting. I can get back to it. We've got performance monitoring, briefing and isolation for elderly people, option appraisal for Assistive Technology, which will come forward again, and the draft work plan for 21-22. Okay, Dave, you've got your hand up, and so has Tony. So Dave, you first.
Yeah, Chair, we've I'm not sure we have acknowledged this before now, but we have got inspectors coming in to carry out what they're describing as local authority assurance review. But that's an inspection by a slightly different name, probably a bit smaller than the usual wholesale local authority inspection. It's COVID related. CIW have necessarily wanted to go around all local authorities and really seek some assurance about effectively how we have managed care and individuals through COVID period, and the extent we are meeting our responsibilities or have been able to meet our responsibilities under Social Services and Wellbeing Act. They are here on the 7th of June. Whether we've anything more than informal feedback by the next panel, I think you should at least factor in getting some informal feedback, and then planning probably in your work to have formal feedback at the point that we get whatever letter or report we get back. So it's adding to your workload, but I think it's a necessary one for you to pick up on as a panel, and then just at the same time, just make sure we keep ourselves busy. They're also a regulator or have carried out an regulated inspection of domiciliary care services, and we've got a range of domiciliary care services across across adult services and in children's services as well. So again, I think it's probably sensible to get feedback on the inspection of our domiciliary services at the same time as feedback on the local authority inspection.
Thank you for that, Dave. Liz will take note of that. Tony, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's on the 4th item of the work programme timetable. And I apologise in advance for raising this again, because I think some of you are already a little tired of it. But in that section of the draft programme for the current financial year, will there be any consideration of the move towards using more outcome funding approaches to either this year's investment and spend or next year's financial programme? Because time is slipping away, and it'd be interesting to know what balance of revenue is being committed to outcomes rather than outputs or processes.
I know you've been in communication with Ben Smith on this issue.
I think it's the way round, Chair. I think he wrote to me.
Well, as I said, yeah, whether it is, we'll take note of it and maybe come back to you on that issue again, Liz.
Okay. Can I? Sorry, Chair, I can't find the sim hand. I thought, I know it's the previous cabinet member now, but I thought the previous cabinet member had responded to
We losing you, Dave.
the previous ask, but I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what he committed to. I suppose the minimum is we definitely do what the cabinet member has, albeit previous cabinet member, has committed us for this year. If the ask of the panel is for us to go beyond, if we can be absolutely clear about how far beyond that do you want us to go for this year, and then of course we'll have discussions with cabinet member and heads of service about whether that's doable or not. Remain very cautious about over committing this year when we're so focused on recovery and adaptation, etc. So I don't want to promise something we can't deliver, but as a minimum, we will do what the cabinet has already said we will. But I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what he said in his response.
Thank you, Dave, for that. I think we're looking at this in the October meeting, if I remember rightly. Liz?
In October, I think the plan is to revisit this year's budget, so 6 months on.
Right, okay. Well, let me have a conversation with Dave regarding this issue, Tony, and we'll look at the issue to come back to you.
Well, that's kind, Chair. I mean, I'm not seeking to be provocative or difficult. It's just that if there is an item of the draft work programme for the current year, which presumably is looking ahead to the next year, if we are being serious about moving towards some proportion of outcome funding, I would have thought that programme might not spend too much time on it, but give an update as to where we are, what the thinking is, what the balance of the budget is going to be that's outcome driven rather than other driven, and just sort of progress update really, because the budget setting timetable for the following financial year will come around very quickly. And this, in my book, this is a very important piece of work, but a very difficult piece of work that we all need to understand. But maybe I'm a lone voice of pessimism and dissent, but we'll see.
No, I'm sure Dave will look at it, and I'm sure Mark will uphold the commitment of Clive from last year, and we'll come back to it. All right, Mark, you want to say something? You're muted, Mark.
Sorry, thanks, Chair. Just very briefly, if Clive was said that he's going to do something, Clive Lloyd, I'll make sure his word is honoured. Just to add that I would be very disappointed if a single pound was solely spent on output. We thought almost all will have some element of outcome in the desire of what we're spending on.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that, Mark. Okay, and with that, any more questions? Amy, you want to just come back on that?
Hi, sorry, this is going a little bit off the order of the agenda, so I don't know if this is allowed, but I'm conscious that Tony had emailed beforehand. There were 7 questions in relation to agenda item 4, and I know we've answered all of them amongst all the different questions now, because a couple of them were about outcomes as well, but there was an outstanding one about the complaints process, and just I was wondering if you would allow me, Chair, just to update very briefly on that.
Yes, please.
Okay, so the question had been about, with the complaints process, is there any independent input to this? And if there's been any recent summary for the number and the type of complaints received and action taken? And I wanted to, and it was Dave mentioning the CIW visit that reminded me of this, because CIW have also asked the same questions. So we've recently pulled together the most up-to-date information on the complaints. So we have them up to the last quarter, but also to let you know there is an annual report that goes into council. So we can certainly share the link to that, which explains the type of complaints, the type of outcomes, whether they were stage 1, stage 2, and just some reassurance that when they go to stage 2, they are independently looked at. So it's someone outside of someone independent that we actually buy in to do stage 2, and then obviously those that go to the Ombudsman as well. So that all that information is available, that we can share the links or circulate via Liz after the meeting.
Thank you, Amy. And with that, thank you all for attending. Thank you both, Lucy and Amy, for all your input. It's been very, very interesting and very informative. So thank you all for attending.